Good morning, everybody. Excellencies, Prime Minister of Iceland, Prime Minister of Sweden, experts. My name is Reinis Āboltiņš. I'm a researcher at the Center for Public Policy, Providus, which is the leading think tank in Latvia, and my honor is to host you today in this discussion. One of the four discussion groups on green economy and can it be competitive. There is a diversity of various industries represented also in our smaller group and in the forum in general, which will probably and most likely enrich our understanding of how many aspects does actually green economy have, and probably will also lead us to potential answers to the question of whether a green economy can be competitive. And I think there are multitude of opinions on this. We have had hot debates in Latvia here and in the Baltic states in general, specifically in the energy sector, considering the potential of renewables. But renewables is just one part of the green economy, and the notion actually encompasses many more things. So I welcome you to the Future Forum 2013 in Riga, and we have 1 hour for discussions, for the presentations and the discussions, and I'll try to keep the time, and therefore I would like to invite the first speaker of this panel, Birna from Iceland. She is the first presenter to share her experience on how you can manage a healthcare institution in a green way, and is it a green way, and what does it encompass? And probably she can give us some insight. And but before the presentation, just give you a very, very short, brief presentation of yourself, so that we understand your background a little bit better, everybody at the table. Thank you.
Okay, I work with the environmental affairs at the hospital.
Excuse me, please use the microphone if possible.
Yep, I have been working in the hospital for quite a short time. I work with the environmental affairs of the hospital, and it's the first time we are working with these issues. So it's quite new. I'm telling you more about that later. Do you want me to stand up when I am presenting, or?
No, actually, you're welcome to be seated. I think it's very democratic. Let's not be too formal here. Thank you.
But if I just start my presentation, I have been working, yes, with these issues before, both in Sweden and in Iceland. But I'm honored to be here with you today and have a chance to share ideas on this topic and discuss it with you. I'm going to talk about the role of the public sector here as a front runner and as a role model in building a competitive green economy. Can I change the slides myself, or how is it?
If you want, if it's comfortable, I can do it for you.
Okay, so can I do it here?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, no, you cannot do it there, so I have to go forward.
Okay, because this is a race we're talking about here, a race for a green economy, a competitive green economy. And the public sector, as a front runner, can establish a pace for this very important race. It's actually a very important race, it's imperative, and the time is short. We need a very fast pace, faster than we had before. But there are some obstacles on the way, and we actually don't know the path. So there are challenges, interesting challenges here.
Tell me when
yep, I'll just do like this. Landspítali is the National University Hospital of Iceland. It's a public organization. It's the largest, or second largest workplace in Iceland with 4,600 employees. I work with the environmental affairs of the hospital, and recently we set an environmental policy and a program for this university hospital for the first time, actually. So you have to keep in mind that in Iceland, we do not have a long or extensive history of greening processes, especially not in the public sector. So keep that in mind. But the vision of our policy, which is the first that we had before, is to be exemplary in these environmental issues. And we have a more detailed environmental program which is connected to this policy. Please change. And these are the key projects that we are working on right now. And they include the significant environmental issues that we have. We have been measuring the environmental impact of our operations and have some numbers that are actually quite impressive because we have, yeah, there is much we do there in the hospital. So we have had set measurable goals in our work and actions. So right now we're working hard on these projects, but working hard in these projects and getting the numbers right is not enough to be a good front runner. Because I want to mention two other things. That because if we just work on the numbers, it does not necessarily affect others in the society. But the two things I'm going to mention now are very important, and they could often be more emphasized in the public sector. We are trying to do it by us. We are taking our first steps. Because those are very important for building a green economy. Mm-hmm. So, when we are finding solutions, and we are removing obstacles, because there are obstacles on the way, you can be assured of that. We are cooperating with others, both our employees, of course, but outside of the hospitals, because the solutions are there. And we have been always seeking best practices from other sectors and from other countries. So we have been visiting hospitals in Sweden, for example, and that has helped us a lot and made it possible for us to do these things more fast and more effective. Example is when we were defining clear handling of our hazardous waste. It was very unclear in Iceland. We had no guidelines, and the authorities gave us very unclear answers. We could just take the routines from Karolinska and just adapt them to our organization, and it did it very much easier for us. When we were building new bike stands, because we are working on eco-friendly transports, we were consulting both cyclists within our employee group and also the Cyclist Federation and others. So we got up with really excellent stands that are very well received by our employees. And the procurement, I want to mention that because that's a very important thing too. Then we are emphasizes to have a dialogue with the market. And like when we were needing printers at the hospitals, we had a dialogue with the market and ended up with buying printing services instead of buying printers. So we buy or we pay for each sheet. So that has resulted in we have cut our paper use in half in 2 years. And we just need 300 printers today. We needed 1,200 before. And it has saved a lot of money. We have saved now 300,000 euro per year in this new thing. So there are, and this is the other thing I want to mention, because it's not enough to have the solution and the experience. You have to share the knowledge. So we are really trying to communicate the things we are doing, our vision and the solutions we come up with. And we use example numbers and pictures for people to understand what we are really talking about. We have had some external communication in the news in connection to our new environmental policy and in the media. And also the internal communication we emphasize to have good news, or actually news to our employees. We have a web page, and again we use examples. We use textiles instead of plastic wraps on our linen carts, and we save 10 tons of plastic per year just in this little thing. So we tell our employees about it, and it also saves money. So we are taking our first steps at Landspítali, and we know what we want to do, and we know how we want to do it. it is a very large organization in Iceland. So we have seen that our efforts are gaining attention and encouraging others, the market and other actors in the society, to move in this direction. So the public sector is a very important front runner in this race, to try new solutions, find new solutions, and communicating, sharing with others in an effective way. And then it gets easier for others to participate and encourage them to take part. But we need, of course, a faster pace in this race. I think we need more front runners.
Thank you, Birna, so much for your presentation. May I actually ask everybody who has comments or questions to keep those in your mind or put them down on the paper if that's more convenient for you, because we will have a discussion after all three presentations. That will probably help us jump between the issues and try to consolidate the ideas in a better way. But may I please now welcome Lauri from Estonia to introduce himself very briefly. He will be coming here. He will be speaking on the role of public sector as a catalyst for green property. What does he mean by that? We are shortly going to find out.
Well, thank you very much. So, in order to skip the explaining part of what I mean by that, I changed it to building market. So, slightly similarly to what Birna was saying, I will talk about the green buildings, sustainable buildings, what they mean and how public sector could lead the market. Shortly about myself, I'm since September a member of management board of Estonian Environmental Investment Center. So that's a public agency financing environmental projects ranging from water treatment, waste, renewable energy, to also nature conservation and environmental awareness and education for young people. So a wide variety of issues, and we finance nearly 200 million euros every year projects. So quite a significant amount in Estonian context, but also I don't think it's moderate in European context. But my background, I was previously working also as director for energy department in the Ministry of Economy. So that's why I try to bring more also the competitiveness side to the Environmental Investment Center, which used to be more about traditional nature conservation, but we try to refocus to the green economy, sustainable issues. But enough of that. So I seriously believe that public sector can have huge impact on the competitiveness, on the innovation, but also through being a smart procurer, solving many of the environmental problems, but not only environmental problems by procuring smart, sustainable, well-planned buildings. So my message is buildings we work and live in matter. They matter a great deal. Why? We spend roughly 90% of our time indoors. 40% of final energy is consumed in buildings. Different studies indicate poor indoor climate. It reduces productivity, learning performance. If we talk about school, for example, poor materials, they are clear costs. They cause diseases, they cause from allergies to asthma and cancer. I don't think there's a prime minister saying we have too much money in our health insurance fund. So by building bad buildings, you create problems for Minister of Health or Minister of Social Affairs. By building bad buildings, you create problems for Minister of Education. By building bad buildings, you create costs for the taxpayer and problems for Minister of Environment. For example, my organization, we have financed building and renovating the waste facilities. Some of these investments we would not have had to bear and make, and we would have saved the money if we had been smarter about regulating what materials do we use in the buildings and putting obligations about recycling to them, or putting in the procurement obligation to have parts of the materials recycled. All these things, you can avoid really the cost on the budget, which is extremely critical issue for ministers of finance, prime ministers, but yet through perhaps low awareness or perhaps, let's say, inertia in a procurement practices, we nevertheless make the same mistakes all over again and cause these costs on the taxpayers and society, which we could avoid. Also, wrong location means lower accessibility of public services and need for additional infrastructure. If you build in a wrong place, remote place, you have to build new roads. It induces additional transport, additional CO2, and so on. All these are costs. And that's why, if we talk about the buildings, let's not talk about energy efficiency, which is now a topic that is being talked. It's good, but it's not enough. And also, if we talk about the competitiveness, and that's the topic here as well, construction, engineering, and material production, these are very big economic sectors. In Estonia, they form more than 10% of GDP. They are significant also exporting sectors. If we talk about, for example, wood houses, log houses, also construction materials, I'm sure it's the same case for in our countries. So by being smart and demanding, you push for innovation in these areas, which again brings jobs and competitiveness. So as I said, there's a lot of talk about nearly zero energy buildings. In Europe, we have put in place directive saying all public buildings must be nearly zero buildings starting from 2019 and all other buildings from 2021. But that's, I think, not enough. If we talk about green growth, you have to take all, other environmental, social, economic aspects also into account. But take a more holistic approach. Just an example, at the wrong location, as I said, also nearly zero energy building can cause additional energy consumption and emissions by induced transport. That's statistics from American study. Okay, in Europe the cars are smaller, the distances are smaller somewhat, public transport is slightly better, but nevertheless, in US case, average building actually causes more, 30% more is the transport energy usage to go to that building, back and forth to work. So if we talk about nearly zero buildings, you can have very efficient building, but nevertheless it causes at the wrong location significantly more by induced transport. So most of countries actually are struggling with the renewable target in transport sector. In heat and electricity, countries are progressing well, but in transport sector, countries are not doing so well. So this means every let's say, joule of transport energy cut by better planning means less burden to invest into renewables in this area. Also, built from wrong materials, you have very low energy consumption, but nevertheless it can cause significant emissions by having the wrong materials. There's a huge difference in terms of emissions of the construction materials themselves, whether you use steel, whether you use virgin ore or recycled steel. Things like these matter a great deal. Also, how much you import. One of the biggest impacts in terms of global emissions is importing from far distances the building materials. So you can, like the example of importing ecological food from New Zealand. Well, it's ecological in New Zealand, but when it arrives to Europe, it's not very ecological in terms of impact. So if you're serious about really sustainability, also look at the materials you build, the public sector buildings. I said buildings are important, but in a service economy, people are even more important than buildings. And what the graph is about is that on the left-hand side, actual average cost service sector, let's say building, people are working, whether it's software company, IT company, legal or public service building. Actually, the costs related to the building itself in the total costs that occur in this economic activity or public service, the biggest part is the wages and productivity of the people there. And the really small part is the actual building cost. So in this sense, if you invest a little bit more into better planning and better building in the middle, and especially, for example, extremely microscopic part, ventilation, for example, indoor climate, you get huge impact on the left-hand side, this wages and productivity. So the message is that with the small investments, actually, and better planning, you affect the productivity extremely a lot. Just to show some of the study results, if the temperature goes above 22, the productivity starts to drop dramatically fast. If the air circulation is low, your productivity is affected severely. We've all been to many meetings where you start to feel dizzy, or children are coming from school, I'm so tired. They are not tired because the curricula is so overfilled. They are tired because the ventilation is bad, the lighting is bad, and perhaps also the school food is not so healthy and good. So by fixing these things, actually, you get the improved productivity or improved learning performance, instead of putting endless research money into how shall we build a better curriculum. Start with the simple things that, as I said, there are many of studies showing that really higher ventilation rate, better indoor climate improves the learning performance in schools, and also more stable temperature, especially in the warmer times of the year, is critical to have sustainable. And I put some numbers about the CO2 concentration of particles in schools. So as a background, 400 is what is outside in nature, average. Between 600 and 1,000, the concentration means you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, that develops a certain smell. Above 1,000 to 2,500, you start feeling dizzy and tired soon. And above 2,500, concentration means quite significant health effects. So if you look at the numbers, there are a range of many schools, for example, in each of the countries present here, where children are exposed to significant health effects. And this is a cost. This is a cost for society that you can fix by investing more smartly. If we talk about increasing the performance of learning by 15%, what it means? It means 1 year of teaching. Children would have require 1 year less to learn the same, perhaps. So that's a huge cost that we are causing. And there are lots of bottom-up initiatives for green buildings, labels that try to address these issues. So all the time the question is, okay, this seems shocking, how do we go about it? Well, in many other countries, the private property developers have initiated these tools of Ecolabels. And it's a basic Excel spreadsheet. You put the numbers about the building that you plan to do in, and it says whether it's sustainable according to these criteria or not. And different labels cover different aspects. Some cover only the energy efficiency. Then there are others like the LEED in US, which covers the location and also operating, because it's important. If you build a good building but you don't use it accordingly, then the positive effects are lost. And then the German one, for example, the label, it covers also how you plan the building, stakeholder involvement and everything. So what it does, it gives you a very transparent tool that the taxpayers or public procurers, they can, use this and say, is this building sustainable and green building or not? And if public sector wants to build non-sustainable building, then the taxpayer should ask, why? Is there a logical reason behind why would you choose not to do it? And first reaction always is, oh, it's much more expensive. But experience shows that it's not more expensive, or sometimes it's up to 5% more expensive. But if you take all the costs that you avoid and all the positive effects, I think the net effect in most countries would be totally positive. So I would urge to think that top-down leadership in sustainable construction, it pays off if we build better public buildings at the right location, from sound materials, high energy efficiency, good lighting, indoor climate. What it means lower energy bills for public sector, lower health bills for public sector, improved productivity in public service, better accessibility, and also innovation and boosted export capacity. The knowledge that you create, you can export and sell it. So how to create competences and commitment for this? Thank you.
Thank you, Lauri, for your very, very thoughtful intervention. And personally, I started thinking of which country shall I send my kids to when they go to school. Well, Scandinavia is doing slightly better than Britain, if we can believe those figures. But so probably we all have space for development. And the key word probably so far during these two interesting presentations is sustainability. And I bet that the presentation by Tadas from Lithuania will also eventually lead to sustainability as one of the key issues, although he's going to talk about financing green economy and more about renewable energy, which is a big issue these days. But please, Tadas, a short introduction about yourself, and then the floor is yours.
I have spent first 8 years of my career working for the environmental issues, both nationally and then internationally. And now last 6 years, I'm working for the largest renewable energy company in the Baltic states, called Neli Energia. So, of course, I have vested interest in the presentation, keep that in mind. But to be serious, also the Latvian Prime Minister today raised a question, so can we afford, can we pay for the green energy? And I noted at least some of the Prime Ministers nodding that that is indeed an important topic. And I wanted to reflect using the very basic knowledge on that, using actually the example of Lithuania. But this is very to a huge extent the same for the all Baltic states meaning Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Just to have the very brief, so to say, situation overview where we are. Energy-wise, the Baltic states are a small region with the production of something like 20 terawatt hours and consumption of 5 terawatt hours. So why an energy deficit in electricity sector? And this deficit is still to grow because we will be closing still some power plants due to environmental concern. So the region needs energy. The region has strong interconnections with Russia, and today it has weak connections with the Nord Pool market. And of course, any prime minister or minister of energy or head of state is facing the question, you know, how to provide the energy for the people, and everybody wants it cheap. But those who think more also want it to be secure and also sustainable. That's how we at the end came to the green energy in the first place. So luckily we have a big, good and green neighbor. We have the Nord Pool, which is almost 20 times bigger an energy producer than the Baltic states together. Has lots of green energy, hydro, and even new capacities are coming into this market. And according to the forecasts, the Scandinavian countries will be net exporters of energy, at least in the coming decade. So the heads of states always, at least in Lithuania, but also in other countries, they talk about the energy security, and they say we are so much dependent on the Russian imports. But the good news is that situation will be changing quite dramatically in a couple of next years, and we will get very strong connections actually to the Nordic market, which is as we just discussed, very good and transparent and big market. And that means that at least in our view, is that energy security in electricity sector will be there because we will have alternative markets to tap in case of whatever, some political disturbances. Also some other projects like LNG terminals are going on, and we still have generating capacities in the region, though they are quite expensive. So the message here is that actually energy security by 2015 will be largely addressed to the very large extent in the Baltic states. And I think that allows us to really have the free hand and to think, how do we want our energy sector to look like? That's the some EU agency produced map on the wind resource in Europe, green and yellow being the best and red being not so good. So the message here is that actually the Baltic states have pretty outstanding wind resources in corresponding areas, basically the coast. We also have quite not so many people, not so dense population, so we have pretty much favorable conditions for the wind energy in this region. We also are quite forested, not so forested as Finland or Sweden, but still quite forested, so we have pretty large resources of the biomass. And this is just a couple of numbers here which show the very simple, very basic potential, let's say that's Lithuanian case, for the renewable energy production, wind and biomass. And we could see by adding these three numbers that it makes around 9 terawatt-hours a year without too much hassle, which could be produced in Lithuania, whereas our annual consumption is 10 terawatt-hours. So in principle, in the electricity sector, we could have 90% renewables in the very foreseeable future without too much problem. And during the discussions, we often, say that it's not possible, especially the wind. It's not possible to build that much. Countries are small and so on. But Denmark is a very good example, being smaller than Lithuania, having 4,000 megawatts of wind compared to several hundred which we are talking about. So we can see that that can be done. And also our countries are pretty small energy consumers, because when you talk Germany or UK, you need thousands and thousands of megawatts to do any difference. Here we are talking, 200-300 turbines in the whole country make huge difference in the energy structure. So the key question, can we afford it? Here on the left-hand side graph, you see the main producers in Lithuania year by year, and that's the subsidy from the state over the market price. Not talking that these are built in a way for free, most of them. They are not bank financed, they're old plants. And the green line there is the wind energy price, for which is the feed-in tariff, for which is acquired 2013 and onwards. So you can see that subsidy for the wind, because we don't have this unsubsidized production, energy production in Lithuania, is 2 to 3 times smaller than to any other conventional source in Lithuania, be it gas, whatever. So for me, the question is very obvious. It's not that it can be competitive. It's already now much, much cheaper than any other production. And that's still somehow, during the discussions comes the opposite way. We still say that it's expensive. It's some EU-induced luxury just to fulfill EU targets. So I totally do not agree with that. And on the right-hand side, we just had new gas-fired turbine build in Lithuania, so we could compare the new build, new wind to new gas production, modern gas power plant. And if you check the numbers, you will see that again, subsidy for the wind, which is limited in a time-wise compared to unlimited gas subsidy, is 3 to 4 times lower for the wind. So wind today in Lithuania costs 3 to 4 times less than energy from the new build gas plant. Not talking about gas imports, rising prices, CO2, all the story. And Danish Prime Minister is not here, but she could confirm, because that's a Danish study, what we have on the bottom of the slide, that by reducing the market price, if you're having the proper market mechanisms when green energy is traded on the market, so the green energy actually is reducing the cost, the market price of the energy in the whole market, because wind energy doesn't have the cost. It would sell for any price. So actually the wind energy, if it's properly integrated in the market, has a positive effect on the whole market price, meaning additional value. Still, energy means lots of money, so how can we finance it? First of all, we could use the available resources more efficiently. When we look where Lithuania spends the means to subsidize the energy, we can see that the money is now spent to finance 2 terawatt hours of gas electricity, and the same money would finance 6 terawatt hours of wind energy, so 3 times more with the same money. So we don't have to look for much money, it's just there. Feed-in schemes, they're very good, they're right, polluter pays, but of course end consumers are paying, so no politicians like that when the energy prices go up. Two topics which I think should be the future. So emission trading schemes, now as the emission trading units are so cheap, so I think that the current emission trading scheme is not really adequate. It doesn't really support, and the polluters don't really pay the real price for the pollution. And of course, EU funding, investment funding, that's more probably relevant for our countries, but that's one way to reduce the burden on the end customer. Can we make it even cheaper? The answer is very clear, yes. So technology is on one hand, but on the other hand, the key factor for the investors, for the return of investors, is the country risk. So if we manage to provide a consistent policies without retroactive changes, as we can see in some European countries, we see the debate ongoing in Estonia, when you invest money for 20 years and then after 2 years they say, let's change the tariff. So that goes into the risk, and then investors demand higher returns. So nobody likes that. And of course, removal of entry barriers and better cooperation among the states really has a big potential by sharing the energy production between themselves, have a huge potential in making wind energy even cheaper. Yeah, so concluding slides actually. Very much repetition of what I just said. One very important thing that in the Baltic states, I don't know how about the Scandinavia, we still are struggling to open the market. We still have a lot of state-run energy projects which are somehow seen as a competition to the private, let's say, green energy projects. And there is always lack of resources, and we still see the preferences which our governments give to the conventional state-run projects, which by nature usually are not so efficient, not so on time, not so on budget. I mean, the state usually is not the best owner and not the best investor. And another key message here is that the Baltic region, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, have all the components. We have the pumped hydro stations, we have fast gas turbines, we have the key components of infrastructure in place. So we can really, by cooperating together, we can really make the green energy work in the region and actually produce lots of it. And private capital is of course here to do it, and it's in the hands of actually politicians to provide adequate policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Tadas. This was definitely inspiring, especially for me, having the temptation of getting deeper into energy issues as having the background of energy policy analysis, but I'll try to alienate myself as much as possible into going too deep into this topic. Well, we have now about 22 minutes for dynamic discussion, and let's go directly to it, and please, the floor is, anybody can actually intervene and just raise your hand briefly and introduce yourself and reflect on whichever matter you want, which is related, of course, to the topic. And what I personally observed, again, I can just repeat again, sustainability is probably one of the main keywords here in this debate. How much do we need to invest to be green, to be more environmentally friendly and friendly for towards ourselves? In which ways can we most efficiently save resources, and shall the measures to become greener or stay greener be motivating in a positive or in a negative manner? Shall we prohibit or shall we stimulate in a positive way? Sometimes positive stimuli doesn't work, so we need to push people slightly in their back to make some changes. Very often we face situations where there is no pain, there is no gain, unfortunately. But please, the floor is open now, and just before making the comment, please introduce yourself very briefly. Welcome. And please use the microphone.
I would like to thank you all for very interesting presentation, very inspiring. And I have one or two questions to Birna about hospitals. Are you aware of similar projects led by hospitals in Nordic or Baltic countries regarding sustainable and green approach? And one thing about obstacles, as you mentioned, is there any obstacle there has been more difficult to solve than others?
Yes, please.
Yeah. We are very much aware of how other hospitals have been doing, and that was one of the first things I did when I came to hospital, to go abroad and visit other hospitals like Karolinska, and we're looking also abroad to the US, and we're looking into how others are doing, because then we can find solutions that we can adapt to us and do this in a fast way, because we are starting quite late in this. So it's a really important, and it's very good. It would be very good if it would be easier to share and get knowledge from others. Like Karolinska has put a lot of documents on the web, so it has been very good for us. But more cooperation, more sharing of knowledge like this would be very helpful. I think more for countries like, small countries that are maybe a little bit ahead of after others. It could be easier for them, and the other could also learn. And the other question with the obstacles, there are always obstacles, and maybe the biggest obstacles are within ourselves and within our employees, because it is so hard sometimes to get from the habits. And the procurers, they are afraid of putting requirements on the market. But when they try, they see that it is giving a lot. But we have also obstacles in, like guidelines in Iceland. We have almost nothing to go within. We just have the regulations, and then we have to fulfill them. So no one can often answer our questions from authorities, and we have to find the answers ourselves, or go abroad and ask how others have been solving problems that we are dealing with.
But what about the staff? Are they positive?
Yes, they're really positive. Everyone is very interested in it, and that's a very good thing. And we have been really promoting this and communicate about this. But again, when we are really doing some changes, you really have to go into it and talk to everybody. And if you forget one link, then nothing gets done. So this takes time.
Thank you. I saw another hand up there. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kristin Lyng from the Norwegian delegation, but of course I have to say I'm here as a global citizen, and I'm working with the Norwegian Meteorological Institute, and I have the formal responsibility for the open data policy that we have at our institute. Besides from that, I've been working on bigger ICT procurements, and I'm a lawyer. And it's warming my heart that you put procurement here in your presentation, because I think I agree with you when you're saying that we need to have dialogue with the market on these topics. And we also, as Mr. Tammiste mentioned, we need to be refocusing on the sustainable economy. But really, I see two big obstacles on this, and it's the procurement law and the regulation as it is today. And it's also this, at least as we are using in Norway, the standardized contracts that we're putting into these projects. Why am I saying this? I think today procurement regulation is creating an arm's length distance between the public sector and the market, and that is it's not healthy if we're going to be forerunners in these topics. So the head of states, they wanted the challenge. So do something with the procurement regulation. And we are going in new ways in this topic with green economy. And this means that we need less bureaucratic pressure on doing mistakes in this field. You're saying the biggest obstacle is inside ourselves, and maybe we're too afraid to make mistakes or how we do procurements. And that is not leading us into new innovative projects. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw there is another hand up there on the other side of the table.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Pekka Soini. I'm from Finland, and I'm heading Tekes, what is Finnish Innovation Funding Agency. Yeah, thank you. Very good presentations from different parties and different parts of the issue. And this whole topic, can green economy be competitive? My approach is that that we have to create market for us in, let's say, northern countries to compete against, you know, Chinese and Asian innovation. So I guess that if we have an approach that this is a global phenomena anyway, this green economy, so now we have to create a market and create and remove obstacles, as you said, that, for example, public side can do a lot just staying away. I mean, removing obstacles and paving the way and really building a demand-driven innovation opportunities. Because this is not one country is only small market, but when we all together, Nordic countries and Baltic countries, we start to be already a kind of area if we have effective sharing, and maybe, you know, also regulations should be also kind of aligned. But I fully agree that, for example, this public procurement and innovative public procurement is one of the issues what EU can again work a lot, because we are anyway, all the countries are tied with EU regulations there. So this kind of the one of the key issue there is this, and how can we be then more innovative than Asian countries? We have to use the strengths what we have and combine different kind of issues. Again, like ICT combined to this other kind of the building practices, or we were talking about schools also, or hospitals. So how much ICT kind of innovations can be mixed in to be more efficient and creating opportunities for small companies, again, driving and drawing innovation there. So a lot of different things can be done. And again, public side by removing obstacles, but then also creating opportunities. Pilots, smart cities is a good example that you can have holistic planning and then active sharing. There are good examples already in Europe. In Finland, we have several activities ongoing. In Sweden, Royal Seaport is a very good example where you holistically look the total issue and mix different technologies, ideas. So that kind of comments.
Thank you. I would actually urge, I cannot force other experts to intervene, but I would actually urge them to make some comments as well, if they have any. Otherwise, I have something to say myself, but do I see any hands up there? Yes, Mr. Prime Minister.
I like very much that, Tadas, I think your name was, that you mentioned that you represent an economic interest. I think it's very important to say that everything related to energy represents enormous economic interests. So this is partly why this is very difficult, because it's also trying, economic interests trying to influence political leaders, and there are vested interests. I also think it's very important to say that all energy production that I know leads to discussions among people on what is right and wrong. For instance, we have introduced a lot of subsidies to increase wind power in Sweden. This is now creating a lot of reactions in Sweden against windmills because they are not popular. And it's not true to say that we would do anything for climate protection, because the toughest political law we have is protecting the fact that we cannot increase hydropower, which is probably the most renewable, because we don't want to use more of the water flows in northern parts of Sweden. So we are doing a lot of signaling that is not going in the same direction. Then coming to politicians, very often this discussion is on subsidy side, but having followed the Copenhagen discussions and climate protection latest years and listening to the experts, they would partly argue against that, saying that no, it's probably better if you introduce CO2 taxes and increase the pricing mechanism, using the pricing mechanism, getting it more expensive to use fossil fuel-based energy rather than trying to cherry pick and subsidize your favorite way of making energy. That's what we have been trying to do in Sweden. We have, since 1991, introduced a CO2 tax, which is now at the highest level in the world. Nordic countries have also introduced CO2 tax, not as high as the Swedish one. A lot of countries have still not put it in place. In many parts of the world, we still subsidize the use of fossil fuel. So there's a large difference in how we approach these matters. And that comes to my final question. What's the purpose of all this? Well, globally, I would say it's climate protection. And there we have the problem that we still do not have the international agreements to support the deeds we need. It has gone a few steps in the right direction, but we do not have the final international agreements we would need. Without these kind of agreements, it's very hard to make this cap and trade that we probably need. We have it in Europe, but we do not have it worldwide. The other thing is, of course, the close nearby environmental impact of waste and everything that's mentioned here. People want to live in a safe surrounding with a good environment, so they react also to the effect on being neighbors to waste pollution or things like that. That's another important aspect. And the third aspect, as mentioned by you, is you want to be proud of your employer. You like them to have a modern view on sustainability. They should provide, as you say, means for be able to using a bike and everything that you mentioned. So I think you need to do all of this, but some are international political level, some are national political level. Very much is actually everyday management of companies and public sector facilities. To my mind, I think we are doing everything at the time in Nordic countries, definitely in Sweden. But why isn't it going quicker? Well, as I mentioned, there are still a few problems. One of them is the lack of international agreements. And the second that has been mentioned here today is, of course, we don't have enormous amounts of resources, and therefore this discussion on should we use CO2 taxes or large subsidies is a very important question. Well, to say the obvious, in Sweden we are doing both. We have the CO2 taxes, but we also have all of these subsidies. But it's creating the kind of discussion I mentioned.
Thank you. Is there Tadas, please?
We feel, or what we see in our, so to say, business, that might be different in other parts of the Europe, but across the same, I think it's quite the same across Europe, that it's in principle not possible to put any new power plant purely on market price. Definitely not on, and there is clear lack of the uniform mechanism, you know. So you subsidize it from one hand or another, whatever. So you find the back doors all the time. But in principle, let's say in the Baltic states, you cannot build new power plant without subsidies. And if we have to subsidize, but when we discuss in public or with politicians, we always hear that it's a green energy which gets subsidies. But it's, as I just tried to show, that actually the gas sector gets much higher proportionally and in total numbers. So I think that's a bit the way where Europe has to find its way. How do we deal with the problem that we have to replace old outgoing capacities with new ones, still maintaining the market somehow? Because otherwise, who can compete with the Scandinavian hydro, which goes at 44 euros whole year round, more or less? You cannot do that, simply. Thank you.
Thank you, Tadas. Well, definitely energy sector is the one where most of the contradictions are involved when it comes to discussion whether or how much states should intervene in the market. And definitely probably the only resource going for the market price is really the large hydropower, because the small hydro is also subsidized, and it gets at least 2 times more than large hydro. Well, wind power in Latvia, for example, the subsidy for the wind power for the first time has dropped lower than the subsidy for gas, the subsidy which is paid over the presumed market price. So it's interesting, but definitely the Baltic states have slightly different situation regarding energy resources than any other any of the Scandinavian countries, including Iceland. Iceland is a very specific situation, though. A very happy situation where you can simply plug a wire in the ground and basically get out energy. So, but you have your risks too. Great Britain is definitely an example of how lively can a market be when it's open and liberalized. Specifically looking at the gas market, for example. Could it be an example where the continental European countries could follow? I don't know. Probably the situations, the historical backgrounds have been too different, but definitely there are things that we can learn from the Brits. Talking about all the subsidy and market intervention thing, well, the question still remains, and when and how much shall we intervene in the market processes, and which processes are the ones that we should prioritize as the ones that we should support by adding a little bit to the market price, so to say, and of course, how much does it cost and what social cost does this incur? Well, energy sector is definitely one of the biggest sectors in any economy, definitely, but there are other things that were mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, pointing out to how holistically we should actually look at things. It's virtually impossible to look at something called green economy if we just cherry pick different separate sectors and try to make them very competitive, initially providing support and then just letting them go into the markets. But probably the question indeed is much bigger. Is this Nordic-Baltic region and, well, plus UK, is it competitive vis-à-vis other regions globally? And most likely, when we talk about competitiveness and green economy in our own countries, we have to keep in the back of the mind the global situation that no country in the 21st century stands alone somewhere. Well, except for Britain geographically. I hope it stays this way. And Iceland definitely geographically separate too, but it's getting closer to Europe as far as I have heard. Anyway, so, there are a couple of minutes for the last interventions if somebody feels. So, Lauri, please, the floor is yours.
Just a question, perhaps to use the opportunity to Swedish Prime Minister to continue with the energy policy and subsidies. Do you see a chance of moving more towards unified approach? There has been talk and ambitions by DG Energy to raise the issue of unified subsidy approach or taxing approach. Do you see that ETS European emission trading system could become the key policy driver, and member states could phase out their own, let's say, taxing incentives and subsidies? Or do you see a possibility in any closer future for more cooperation in terms of subsidies in the Nordic-Baltic area? So what do you see as main key issues and challenges?
Well, we would agree that the emission trading has not been working the way it should. And, well, it's not expensive enough, but therefore you should lower the cap, which I think should be prepared, and this has been discussed. What confuses the discussion sometimes is that this way of talking about having more the same kind of taxation is viewed as also a part of a centralization discussion inside Europe. They want to have the powers to Brussels, and then everyone reacts, we do not want that. It also very often confuses because they are also searching for incentives to have resources of their own. So it's also feeling that they want to have a taxation of their own in the institutions of Brussels. So that could be energy, that could be something else. And I think if they drop that and just saw on what we're trying to achieve on the energy markets, it would be an easier discussion. So that's very often a reaction. I agree that we should, I mean, we have been engaged in a lot of talks with Norway on our green certificates, which we have now also broadened to Norway. And I think the more you could cross-border use these kind of both subsidies and the way we are dealing with taxation, the better it is. Probably better, and especially as I also think one of your pictures showed that we are getting more and more integrated, a Nordic-Baltic energy market. And we very often discuss this. Again, as I mentioned, we introduced CO2 tax. It's a much higher level when I compared also to Finland, Denmark, Norway. That could also be interesting to see a raise, because again, I think this is probably the most effective way of actually increasing climate protection. So I would say yes and no to your question. In some parts possible, in some others the discussion will be tough, but it's more linked to this feeling of centralization inside the EU.
Thank you, and there's an intervention by Iceland's Prime Minister.
Yes, I have one to Lauri. Do you have guidelines or indicators that can be used to measure before you start building, how it will work on and affect the environment? And should the EU lead a policy on this?
Actually, as I showed in one of my slides, the Ecolabels in different countries, these are exactly the guidelines. It's a really Excel sheet. You put in your parameters of the building that you're planning, and it says whether it's green or red or you know, whatever, in terms of whether it's over a certain threshold in terms of, for example, materials you use, or whether it's over the threshold in terms of that you should change the windows to get the kind of the green certificate or the label. So there are different tools, but the key issue is that in terms of they have bottom-up initiatives, and they are local market-based. Although BREEAM is used, for example, also I talked in Iceland, some people are using it instead of building a national kind of label. Also in Estonia now the discussion is, shall we develop our own label or shall we adapt a certain label from our country? Because some buildings have been built according to US standard LEED, but it's always, there are technical specificalities. But I know that European Commission wants to and supports that we should develop a European-wide label. How fast will it progress? Will it really be adopted? That's a key issue. But I think the important thing is that already now there are tools available. Countries can choose from those labels that are on the market already existing, working tools, the ones that adapt and suit the best for their needs and challenges. Because, for example, in LEED, there's a very important component is the water usage. Because in US market, many areas, water scarcity is a huge issue. In Estonia, it's not so. So this part of the greenness, it's not an issue, and we shouldn't assess the building according to it. So there are tools available. And I think what is important is that maybe we can share the knowledge of application of these different labels in the Nordic Baltic countries, and share, did it suit for us if we used, for example, from another market a certain label, or did we have to adapt, in which conditions? Share this knowledge. Maybe we can work together, for example, a regional label adapt from learning of building these buildings and planning and constructing these buildings. So I think there's a lot of, again, as Birna was saying, that a lot of room for exchanging experience and start really by using existing tools available and modify if they don't work for your needs.
On this very positive note and idea, I thank all the participants of this panel, the two prime ministers and all the experts and others for the patience and listening to us. And the moment has come where we have to free up this room for letting some air in to increase the potential productivity of the next discussion group on digital divide. But thank you once more, and have a pleasant stay in Riga and the rest of the day and the debate. Thank you so much.